and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday, the beginning of my week anyway. All of you other guys had to start on Monday, but not me. Nope, it is Tuesday, and I'm glad to be here. It's been a great weekend, my friends, and there was a lot of stuff that happened over the weekend that we got to talk about this morning. But before then, let me just give you a roadmap of where we're going on today's program. At the bottom of the hour, we're supposed to have U.S. Senate or U.S. House candidate David Giralt. He's in a very, very crowded field with Chuck Gray and Bo Beitman. His real name is Dennis. It's not Bo. And Jillian Balow, and there's some others in there too. But crowded field, and he's the first House candidate that we're going to talk to. And we're going to do that about 8:30, or at least we're supposed to. Tomorrow on the program, we'll have yet another House candidate. It is Secretary of State Chuck Gray. He'll be joining us at 9 o'clock tomorrow. So we got a busy week planned. And, the election is heating up. We've roughly got, a little over a month left before the filing period starts. We're pretty much at the end of March. And so the filing period in Wyoming, it's the last 2 weeks of May. 2-ish weeks of May. So anyway, a month to go before we actually have the whole ballot set up. I've always said that if you aren't preparing to run for office about a year in advance, you, my friend, are way behind. Not only with fundraising, but there's a lot of logistics that go into running a campaign. I mean, and it's not just the signs you got to think about, but you got to line up people and websites and all sorts of stuff. So if you're not getting geared up about a year in advance, if you haven't made a decision a year in advance, you're starting from behind. And let's just be perfectly honest. Politics has become almost a full-time sport. It used to be in Wyoming that, you could decide in February or March whether you were going to run or not, and then, file in May, and then you got a couple months during the summer, and then there's the primary. But it's not that way anymore. Wyoming politics has pretty much caught up with the rest of the country in that it is a full-time sport. And it is really a sport. If you break it all down, I mean, it's in some cases it's a contact sport, but it's not like football. It is an interesting time, and as you might have guessed, elections are kind of like the Super Bowl for me, except that I get to spend an entire summer doing it, much to the chagrin of the lovely Christine. But anyway, my friends, we've got a great program planned for you today, and let's start, however, with what happened over the weekend. On Saturday, the Sheridan County Republican Party held its county convention. Now, usually, there isn't anything too controversial that happens in Sheridan. As far as the state goes, Sheridan County is kind of one of the steady hands, the place where we really don't have to worry about it too much. However, during the county convention, there was a controversial bylaw change that was proposed by State Chairman Brian Miller. And let me tell you why we know it was Brian Miller. Because sources have told Cowboy State Politics that really nobody on the executive committee was told about this little bylaw change. And it just showed up Saturday at the convention. It didn't go through the bylaws committee because if it had, it would have been roundly defeated, soundly defeated, beaten like a bass drum. Shall I go on? You see, the whole point of this bylaw change was to prevent, there was 2 points of it, really, to prevent anybody who had declared to run for public office from being in leadership in the Wyoming Republican Party. And even though its proponent, Brian Miller, and the chairman of the bylaws committee argued that no, really what it does is it allows the chairman to step back, let his second in command take over. None of that was true, because if you read the plain language of the resolution, it clearly said that it would be an immediate resignation. Now, the second thing that it did, and I think this is perhaps the more insidious part of it, is that it would have barred anybody who has anything to do with the media from participating in any leadership position throughout the entire party, which means county and state level. And like I said, it was roundly defeated, but it said the vote sounded like it was like 91-2. Or 91-3 or whatever it was. I mean, it was roundly defeated. And you know what? Let me grab it off the printer. Hold on just a second, and I'll grab the resolution, and that way I can read it to you, and we're not just talking in hypotheticals. Hold on just a second. All right, my friends, I've got it right here in my grubby little paws. But it says Sheridan County bylaws, and the title of this thing is Officers and Terms of Office, Officer Incompatibility. So let me just read the first part of this. Oh, and by the way, there's a really good article on the Open Range Record right now about it. It's not the top story, it's one below it, but if you look, it's titled, let me just give you the title of the piece so you can follow along if you want to. But the title of the piece is Wyoming GOP Chair Attempts to Bar Members of the Press from Participation in Party. Which is exactly what it would do. But let me just read you the opening parts of this thing so you understand what we're talking about. And by the way, on that article, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a link to where you can see a copy of this resolution. But anyway, it says no person may serve as county chairman, vice chairman, state committee man, state committee woman, county secretary, county treasurer, or chair of any standing or special committee. So basically nothing in leadership in the county party. And there was also a corresponding state resolution also during his term of office let's see, who during his term of office is a declared candidate for any public office that appears on a partisan or nonpartisan election ballot. So that means county commissioner, city council, mayor, anything. Holds any public office filled by election at federal, state, county, or municipal level. So you can't be a candidate, and you can't be in office. And that probably refers to boards as well, because a lot of boards are elected in the state. So really, if you have any office whatsoever, you wouldn't be able to be in leadership in the party. And here's the really, really, really terrible part. Quote, serves as a member of the press defined as an employee, contractor, on-air talent, or regular contributor for any news outlet, broadcast station, newspaper, news website, or other organized media entity that reports on public affairs in Wyoming. So, in other words, if you have anything to do with the media, you can't be involved in leadership in the party at any level. Now, you can imagine how much exception I took to this because, and a little bit of inside Sheridan County baseball is required here. There are just a couple of people that this would directly affect, and my guess is it would affect a lot more because of boards and, city council and whatnot. Because we do have some precinct people who are county commissioners, I don't know if there's a city councilman, but in Wyoming, Wyoming is made up of a whole bunch of small towns. And so just about everybody wears a variety of different hats. And there just aren't that many people to fill all of these positions. And so often what you find is you may have a city councilman who is also a precinct person who also is on a number of boards, because people just wear a bunch of different hats. But this section in particular would have barred anybody in the press. And in the Sheridan County Central Committee, there are two people directly that this would affect. One of them is me, yours truly, and the other one is a very nice gentleman named Jim Schellinger. Now, Jim Schellinger and I do not agree on hardly anything. I guess if you characterized him in terms of the party, he would be, to be generous, he would be part of the moderates, but the other side. But this resolution, or this bylaw change in Sheridan, was directed at me and Jim Schellinger. It's first, why would you want to bar the press at all? Now, I will admit that often we don't like what media outlets say about us. Most of the media outlets in Wyoming are decidedly liberal, decidedly Democrat, and there is only two that I'm aware of that are even remotely conservative. One of them is this program, which is, let's be honest, it's really hard to get more conservative than me. But the other one is the Open Range Record, which is also co-owned by me. And so other than that, they're pretty well left-leaning. And here's the difference, right? The Open Range Record, it's about facts. Yeah, there's some opinion on there because I think you have to have an opinion section. But our goal is to publish the facts. And I think that we've done a fantastic job of that. But it would bar any of us from being a member of the party. Secondarily, there are this bylaw change is in direct contradiction to a lot of what's written in the Republican Party platform. And so anyway, we published an article about this, and let's just say the chairman of the state party did not have a very good day yesterday. The Facebook post has been seen around 9,000 times. The article itself has been read well over 500 times, and I looked at it early this morning, and it's getting close to 600 times. So anyway, I think this thing is an example of the establishment Republicans, the people who are in power right now, attempting to control and maintain power by any means necessary. And this is the exact thing that we accuse the other side of doing all the time. We definitely accuse the Democrats of doing it, using dirty tricks to stay in power. But it's also an attempt to, and maybe this kind of follows from the first point I made, but this is also an attempt to control the narrative. That if you can't have, if a member of the press can't be in leadership in the party, then they can't know what the inner workings of the party are. And they can't have any influence on it, which, I mean, there is something to be said that you want a completely unbiased press, but that's failing to recognize that people can be objective and that, maybe somebody else might have something to contribute. So anyway, on the podcast yesterday, I went to great lengths going over this thing. There's some of the audio from the meeting in there, and here's kind of the what started to give the whole game away is that when this was first placed down on the table in front of me, I looked up at the chairman of the bylaws committee, and my first question was, "What is this?" And he goes, oh, this is new. This is new. And I said, where did it come from? And he said, I just received this last night from the state. Okay, now, if that phrasing is important because it implies that the state party had something to do with it. But as I've already told you, sources have told Cowboy state politics that this indeed did not come from the state, which leaves only one other place that it could have come from, and that's Chairman Brian Miller. And when Chairman Miller was describing this thing, he gave conflicting reasons as to why it showed up. Now, initially, Miller claimed that this is part of a larger strategy to regain control of our primary elections. I don't exactly know what barring members of the press from party leadership has to do with primary elections, but anyway. And then during the debate, he also said this was given to me by the parliamentarian. Well, if it was given to him by the parliamentarian, then it would have been discussed, or should have been discussed by the executive team at the state. And by the way, there would be no reason for the parliamentarian to even look at this because nothing in Robert's Rules of Order would prevent anybody in the media from participating in the party. And so, and the other thing, the last thing that Miller said, and this is bizarre. But he said we have to do this in order to, quote, in order to maintain public confidence. So you had conflicting stories of how this thing showed up. You had conflicting reasons for even passing it. And beyond that, you have a whole plank in the platform that talks about the freedom of speech. And you're preventing people from participating in the party simply based on where they work. You don't serve as a member of the press, this was another point that I made on Saturday. But Section 3 begins, anyone who serves as a member of the press. You don't serve as a member of the press. You are employed by a media outlet. There's no public service there. It's your job. And the reason why that phrasing was used in this bylaw change is to try to force being a member of the press into the same category as being an elected official, to be in some other office. That's what they were trying to do, is to say that if you are a reporter or if you work for some other media outlet or if you're the janitor at a media outlet, that somehow you are serving the public. That's not true at all. Well, like I said, this thing was roundly defeated. And if you thought that I was going to let this thing go sitting down, oh boy, you really need to watch this program more often. But here's the last part of this, and the last sections, Section B, I guess it's called. A person serving in any office covered by 6.4A, which is the public office section of this, who, after election or appointment, declares as a candidate for public office, is appointed to or sworn into any public office, or accepts engagement as a member of the press, as defined above, shall be deemed to have automatically resigned his or her party office at the moment of such filing, appointment, swearing in, or acceptance. Any vacancy created under this subsection shall be filled otherwise provided by these bylaws. So it's an attempt to control who is in charge of the party. And I might make the argument that you do want members of the press involved. So at least the press has a firsthand account of what's happening with the party. All too often, the media in Wyoming mischaracterizes what happens with the Republican Party. And let's just be honest, they're liberal from the very beginning. So why would they want to provide an accurate account of anything that's going on? Think about the Sweetwater County deal with the resolution to censure Marlene Brady and Darren McCann. The only people that really reported on what was happening there is the Open Range Record. Other than that, the Rocket Miner in Sweetwater County, the paper down there, they just printed an article, Brady and McCann censured. Yeah, but they didn't tell the story that the Sweetwater County GOP absolutely violated their own rules to get that censure pushed through. And so the media the media that we have doesn't report accurately. So why wouldn't you want a Republican, a conservative who's a member of the media to be in leadership? I mean, it just makes sense to me. But the bylaw change is completely arbitrary anyway. It's no different than saying because you're the dog catcher that you can't be a member of leadership. Well, anyway, this thing was killed, and now Chairman Brian Miller is reaping the benefits of his stupid idea. And I hope everybody goes to the Open Range Record and checks out that article. I think it's absolutely an important thing that you understand what your party leadership has been trying to do. And so anyway, that's what happened in Sheridan County. The rest of the meeting pretty much went off without a hitch. One cool resolution I think that was passed was about so-called affordable housing. I put an amendment on there for the state chairman to set up a committee to investigate so-called affordable housing in the state and to find out what's going on there. Miller opposed that one too because it would have actually made him do some work. But anyway, he got beaten on that one too. So another cool thing that happened. Now, you remember I'm always telling you that politics is funny, that politicians and people who want to be politicians do some really crazy stuff, and really it's pretty entertaining. Well, let me give you a case in New York. And this article is entitled DNC's Suggestive Posts About Mamdani's Pothole Blitz Leaves Social Media Speechless. WTF is this? And I quote, a graphic published by the DNC official Instagram account on Sunday shocked media users for suggestive phrasing and sexual innuendo it used to describe New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani's work on fixing the city's roads. Holes filled, the post read in bold blue and white lettering framed over a picture of Mamdani. And I can show you this. Just hold on just a second and I will show it to you. Let's see here. Yeah, we're going to have to do the whole screen. So the screen's going to look a little weird for a minute. So hold on just a second. Here we go. There it is. Holes filled. And it's the post says, as of March 20th, 66,000 holes filled in Mayor Mamdani's pothole blitz. Now, I would like to know who exactly approved this ad. Not only does he look like he just came out of bed, but why on earth would you let this thing out of the office? I think that it just shows you how tone deaf a lot of these people are. And it's just crazy, my friends, that you would let that ad out. But it's really funny. And if you want to laugh at some politics, the Campbell County Republican women are hosting Kyle Mann of the Babylon Bee. And they're going to do that on April 18th over in Campbell County. It's going to be a fun night. And I looked at the tickets. They're pretty reasonably priced. So if you want to go laugh at some politics and have a good time, go to CampbellCountyRepublicanWomen.com. It'll be well worth your time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll have David Giralt, the candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, back in a minute. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listened to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only expanding. Cowboy State Politics Live, the podcast, and now the Open Range Record. Make sure you don't miss any of it. Any of the content that we're bringing to you. And we're working hard to bring you news and commentary and content that you're not going to get anywhere else. And let's just be perfectly honest. The rest of the Wyoming media, they're a bunch of redcoats. They're rhinos, the ones that are registered Republicans, and so you should just pay attention to this program. All right. Well, we've got a number of people that are running for the U.S. House of Representatives, and we've got David Giralt. He's going to be joining us here in just a second. There's Secretary of State Chuck Gray. There is Dennis Bo Beitman. And there's a couple of others that, I have no idea. So I want to go ahead and welcome David Giralt to the program. David, glad you could join us. Glad we could finally set this up. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Let me scoot back a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
Right up in your grill there.
Perfect.
Good morning. Thanks for having me join. I appreciate it.
Well, just a little bit to get this thing all set up. I know you're a busy guy, and so I'm happy that we could finally do that. First thing I always do with all my guests is just give you a minute or two to tell my audience about yourself. So who is David Giralt?
Yeah, who I am in a minute is I'm the son of two legal immigrants. My mother from Cuba, my father from Costa Rica. They moved to Casper, Wyoming, raised me and my two brothers, and with that sort of worldview, grew up here, participated in church, Boy Scouts, and was very civically minded from an early age. I knew I wanted to go into the Army. It's the fault, I think, of my librarian. I was exposed to a lot of these books and these sorts of, this idea of adventure and responsibility to one's country, and ended up commissioning into the active duty U.S. Army in 2013. As a 22-year-old young man, I went to U.S. Army Ranger School, and
very cool.
As a quick aside, I know that you've referred to the U.S. House race as a bit of a circus, and it kind of gave me a flashback. What an absolute circus the beginning of my professional career was, and now I'm kind of back at it again. So it's kind of funny how life comes full circle. Spent 12 years on active duty, deployed a few times, and had the privilege of serving as an Army Ranger, assigned to 2nd Ranger Battalion out of Tacoma, Washington. After that, I finished my active duty career with an assignment to the Pentagon. There, I worked on defense policy. The program is set up so that the U.S. Army can put officers or different leaders in front of members of Congress and their staff to inform effective defense policy, so that people who've actually seen the results of DC's decisions on the ground can come back and say, hey guys, this is working, this isn't working, here's a better way forward. And I spent about 4 years doing that. My wife and I were engaged to be married, and we were moving back to to Casper, Wyoming, and on a shoestring tackle, Senator Lummis's staff had reached out and offered me a position to do trade, agriculture, and homeland security policy for her there at the federal level. Did that for 9 months, and then my wife and I decided to just pull the trigger. We want to start our family here in the state of Wyoming, and moved back, and we're living our lives. And then, of course, this U.S. House seat comes open, and my wife and I are immediately into this prayer mode, so to speak, and kind of thought about it, thought what it would mean for us and our young family, and felt here again another call to duty, an opportunity to serve here again, just in a different capacity. And that's exactly what we're doing. So that's kind of a 30,000 foot view of who I am and sort of what I'm about.
Great. Thank you for that. First, let me just say thank you for making the choices that I didn't. I'm very grateful for what you did for all of our freedom. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, David. That's kind of you.
Well, I mean it. Also, we got something in common. I'm an Eagle Scout, so that's very cool that you were in Scout. So let's get into this. First, I guess you kind of explained why or the decision-making process into running for this. So I guess my first question is, what qualities do you have that would make you a better candidate for the U.S. House race that that all the folks that are in this circus do not?
Yeah, I think that unique to me maybe is coming into this as someone who was raised here. So as a Boy Scout, as you well know, you're all around the state. So I have familiarity with, from Belforce to the Tetons. I've seen this entire state, not only as a young man, but now having the opportunity to have done it with federal policy. I think I'm bringing a unique set of eyes to this. Someone who inherently views the state of Wyoming as a place that gave me every freedom and opportunity to serve this country. But now I think that I have a unique skill set that I feel, quite frankly, as a conservative Republican, I think one part of that is we don't fully appreciate that we have an obligation, a duty to our country to pay things back. And in a very real way, that's kind of how I view this. So, in terms of what sorts of unique qualities I have, I think it's being a leader in extremely tough environments, whether that's deployed to combat several times, whether that's leading from the age of 22. I was a platoon leader from a very early age, assigned to be in charge of 40 people, their health, morale, welfare, and their families. It's a very jarring thing at 22, and you learn very quickly what that means and what the consequences of bad decisions are. And, I think that over a 12-year career, increasing that responsibility, working as a team, again, in very hostile environments with the mentality that this is a no-fail situation, I think bringing that is a little bit unique to this race. So hopefully that answers the question.
Sure, I think so. Now, you use the word conservative. What does that word mean?
I think it's someone who's rooted. For me, it's 7 principles. So to go through those really fast, it's individual liberty, rule of law, peace through strength. It's also the ability to look at the free markets, and free markets I know is a loaded term, especially when we look at the globe. And then of course we want to finish that out with human dignity. So there are 7 principles by which, ranging from individual liberty to limited government, and having those 7 principles guide our decisions. That's what it means to me to be a conservative.
All right, you mentioned human dignity. Where are you at on abortion? Where does life begin? Just talk to me.
At conception. My wife and I are practicing Catholics. That's a non-negotiable for me, and a fairly simple and straightforward answer. But even to make a secular argument there, I think to draw a line anywhere else is fairly arbitrary. So for me, whether that's intellectually or spiritually, religiously, it's fairly clear cut to me that life begins at conception and then goes till natural death.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, that's and I don't know. My next question is about the legislature, but I don't know how much you have followed the Wyoming legislature. But there's been this this serious back and forth on abortion policy. Apparently our Supreme Court thinks it's okay to kill little babies, and I disagree with them. All right, so we just finished our legislative session in Wyoming, and it was, I think a good word to describe it would be contentious. So, you're just getting into politics. And so what do you think? I mean, which house do you think did the best? What do you think was a good outcome? Were there any good outcomes? Just talk to me about the legislative session a little bit.
Yeah, far be it from me to comment on the Wyoming legislature itself. I think that there are some extremely hard workers there who are moving. When you're looking at the leadership or you're looking at the individual members, I think their performance has to be graded by their constituents. I think that's inherent within our state, within our republic. As it comes to performance at the U.S. House level, I think that Speaker Mike Johnson has been incredibly effective. I think it's kind of sad to see the legislature mire itself in sort of petty disagreements. DHS is still unfunded. It's shut down at this point. So, one of the issues scheduling this interview itself was delays at airports. So I've felt this on a real level. But just very quickly to comment on the DHS fight that's ongoing in U.S. Congress right now. Democrats have kind of shown their cards here. It has nothing to do with achieving any sorts of wins for them. If it were the case, Kristi Noem was fired. They should take the win there. She was moved to a different position. The ICE arrests going on in Minneapolis, those were certainly reduced and restructured. Tom Homan was put in place to engage in that instead. So I think that the Democrats have kind of shown their cards here. They're unwilling to move anything with DHS. It had nothing to do with what they were screeching and yelling about for the past few weeks. It's something more nefarious is my fear. So, being mired in those sorts of pseudo arguments and that sort of soap opera drama that's going on there, I think it's a real issue, and it's quite frankly stymieing the president's agenda, which is on a fantastic trajectory.
Now, I think we could definitely agree that what's happening in D.C. is a disgrace, DHS and ICE. But with all due respect, you didn't really answer my question. There are a lot of issues in Wyoming that the folks in D.C. are talking about, but that directly affect us: energy policy, tax policy. We talked about some social policies. I mean, there are some serious things that Wyoming citizens are concerned about. And so my question about the legislature was more directed to, all right, so what's happening in Wyoming? Which of those are important? And what are you going to do in D.C. about them?
Yeah, look, I think the working families tax cut gives us the infrastructure and the ability to actually act on some of those things. I'll take another example, which you didn't mention, but I just finished a statewide tour and heard quite frequently about this: rural healthcare. Right now, the working families tax cut has about $205 million that is allocated and appropriated for the state of Wyoming. The state legislature is going to have an incredible responsibility in assuring that those monies are being well spent, that they're being allocated appropriately, and that places like Uinta County, if there's a young family there that wants to deliver a baby, that they actually can. That we have the ability to attract doctors, to retain very good ones. Those sorts of different things. And I know that you hit on energy policy. Here again, the White House is pursuing their energy dominance strategy. That is another, I think, opportunity for the Wyoming legislature to act decisively, act quickly, and support this president, because at the end of the day, we're in a global competition, especially when it comes to the energy side. And Wyoming needs to be in the driver's seat. We have all of our legacy industries here, which we need everything that works, and Wyoming needs to be in the driver's seat, especially when it comes to the energy conversation. And of course, we can get into all sorts of different issues, whether that be water rights, whether that be allocation of infrastructure monies and those sorts of things. But heard plenty about that just on this past statewide tour. So happy to dive into any of those. I know it's a bit of a smorgasbord of issues.
Well, that's kind of what we do here. So you mentioned a couple of things: rural healthcare, energy dominance, and a couple of those really relate to government getting involved in perhaps sectors of the economy that, it's questionable whether or not they should be. So should the government be picking winners and losers?
Not at all. I think this is one of the things that I actually hear most frequently about is I think the federal government, to the extent that they have a responsibility in this, it's getting out of the way. I think identifying areas where the federal government has the unique capacity at involving itself, it has to be limited. There's nobody that let's take a rancher, for instance. They're running a cow calf operation out in Sublette County. The federal government, there's no staffer, whether located in a regional office or back in DC, who's going to know more about that operator's operation than themselves. So I think to kind of answer your question, does the federal government have an issue or an obligation in picking winners and losers? No. I think the only case that can be made for that is in limited circumstances when it relates to national security. And even then, I think the federal government has an obligation to explain the nexus there and why that particular industry may be involved in national security priorities.
All right, so let's talk about one of those national security priorities. We briefly mentioned the problems with funding ICE and everything that Chuck U. Schumer is doing in Congress to them. But one of the big issues we're seeing in Wyoming is that despite the Trump administration's efforts, there's a huge problem with illegal immigrant truck drivers on I-80. I just spoke with Congresswoman Hageman last week, and she told me that 1/3 of the folks that the Laramie County sheriffs have stopped on I-80 are illegal immigrants. And so what more needs to be done to curb not just that problem, but a lot of the issues surrounding illegal immigration, human trafficking, narcotics. What needs to be done specifically at the federal level that would help those issues here in Wyoming?
Yeah, this is something personal to me. So, like I said, both my parents are legal immigrants to this country, and there's no one who is more offended by the thought or the actual practice of illegal immigration than either legal immigrants or the succeeding generations. So, this is something personal to me. And additionally, my dad was a long haul truck driver. He worked for KLM, had over 1 million miles driving. So, this is something that
we kind of hit them both, didn't we?
Yeah, this is, in my summers we didn't vacation at Martha's Vineyard. Instead, as a little boy, my dad would give me work gloves, and I'd go pretend as if I was helping him out. Not really, but it was a great opportunity to kind of see the country and gain an appreciation for it. But to your point, Congress has an obligation to codify a lot of the executive orders that the administration is pursuing. So here again, they're pursuing a lot of good work, but it will be all for naught if, I hate to put this out in the ether, but a President Gavin Newsom, President AOC gets sworn into office in 2028. We're going to have a serious problem on our hands. I think we need to finish the smart wall. So this is a sophisticated technology and sorts of vetting processes. So everyone likes to focus on physical infrastructure, but just as important is DHS codifying and making their processes just more efficient. It lends itself to predictability. People know who's coming into the country. We know who to take out of the country. Under 4 years of Joe Biden's open border and the conflict in Iran, which I don't know if we'll have time to get to today, it's a significant issue because they're, and this goes back to the DHS funding and all of it kind of just seems to be very circular, but we have no idea who's in this country. So whether it's a chameleon driver coming dispatched out of Uzbekistan who has kind of a fake DOT number, who's bombing across I-80 at 80 miles an hour with God knows what in the back of their truck with who knows what intentions, maybe they're good, but we don't know. And the problem is we deserve to know. We deserve to know who's transiting our state. And the fact that a third of people, and that's just the number of people who are caught. So Sheriff Kozak deserves an incredible amount of credit. And this is no knock, obviously, to him or to his deputies. How many of those people just slip through the cracks?
A ton, probably.
How many of those people are running a more sophisticated operation and just went around it. We'll never know that number. And I think going around the state, listening to people, they want to know that the federal government is going to allow them to keep more of the money that they earn. That's number one. The second part of that is they want to feel safe and secure in their local communities. And a lot of that relates to illegal drivers, fraudulent CDLs, these sorts of chameleon fly-by-night shops that are just, they're here today, they're gone tomorrow. I have no idea what they're doing. Of course, it should make you feel a little bit less secure. We have no idea if they're engaged in drug trafficking, human trafficking, or anything like that. Who knows? Maybe they're just transporting a salad from Salinas, California to the East Coast, and everything's all copacetic.
Yeah,
but we
probably
don't
not.
know. So.
Well, you brought it up,
Unlikely.
so let's go ahead and talk about it. I'm sure you've got a unique perspective on what's happening over in Iran. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, one of my first deployments, I remember seeing Donald Trump win his election in 2016, and I remember even the conversation then that Donald Trump he's this warmonger, and he's gonna pivot us into Pakistan. We're going into Iran. This was back in 2016, and he came in, and I was deployed at the time, and we were using these massive ordnance airbursts, the Moab bomb, and we were just north of the Pakistan border and kind of finishing with some winter operations. President Trump comes in, he scraps this extremely aggressive bombing campaign that was going to take place in the Tora Bora Mountains. And he says, no, guys, I need to understand what the feedback is here. What's the end state? How long are we staying there? What are we doing? And if nobody can demonstrate that to me, then I'm scaling this back significantly, or we're just not doing it. And he scaled that thing back significantly. That was my first experience with him. And as a veteran, as someone who's served in the post 9/11 Army, knowing that I would go and be deployed to war, I cannot express how much I appreciate the president's approach to this conflict and to others. He's outlined with 4 different strategic planks here what it is that he seeks to achieve. Iran cannot have a navy. They cannot have nukes. They cannot have ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And here again, back to this open border. The Iranian regime, the largest state sponsor of terrorism, can no longer cease to exist. They can no longer threaten Americans. They can no longer prove to be a threat to us here in the homeland or to Americans abroad. And the thing that I would say to those who are kind of white knuckling and a little anxious about the timeline here, I think we have to, again, just put all of this in context. This is a president who bombed Fordo. This is, back in 25, bombed Fordo in and out, extracted Maduro in Venezuela in and out again. And, probably no breaking news here. The United States intelligence services were obviously involved in the decapitation and eventual death of a cartel leader in Mexico. What the president is doing is nothing short of world changing. I think the president's done plenty of good things in his administration, this go around and the first. This to me is chef's kiss. It takes the cake. I think that he's absolutely resetting the world order and making not only America safer, but the world safer. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. And as far as the timeline goes, I have a high degree of confidence in someone who campaigned initially and entered the political stage saying that he didn't want us to be entangled into endless stupid wars. I think he's deserved a little bit of credibility there. I think that he's deserved a little bit of runway to go ahead and negotiate those things. I have a lot of faith in him, if you couldn't tell. So I apologize for going on a little long there, but my take on this is just ultimately summed up. I think the president deserves just a little bit of leeway. We're not too far into this. This is a threat that has been identified by 4 or 5 different presidents in varying degrees of severity. This president had the audacity, the courage, the leadership to actually act. And I think he's going to close this thing out soon. And I think the world is going to be a much better place for it. And America is going to be far safer.
Yeah, I'm constantly fascinated by the different commentators that I read and hear in Wyoming that claim that, we shouldn't be doing this, that Donald Trump promised no new wars. Well, as a historian, I can tell you that there's no president that can really make that promise. I mean, you can try, But when you're confronted with the chief sponsor of terror, people that really do want to kill us, you got to do something about that. So let's talk about veterans issues for a little bit. There are Wyoming spends, in my opinion, not enough on those, but there are some places in Wyoming that we do spend a significant amount of money. But one of those is held up, and we've actually been waiting on cash from the federal government, promised money to overhaul the veterans home in Wyoming. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you haven't, you need to go visit it. But it's from, man, I would say late 1970s, 1980s, and hasn't been really updated. So if you're successful as a member of Congress, what's going to be your policy, and specifically, what are you going to do concerning veterans issues in Wyoming, the hospitals, the VA, just all of it all rolled into one? What's your plan?
Yeah, and to very quickly address the Wyoming Veterans Home in Buffalo, Wyoming, I have been there. I've met with the director.
Cool place.
Oh my gosh, it's it's stunning, and I'm thankful as a veteran that places like that exist. Just because it's nice to know that there's somewhere where the people care deeply about you, and I think that they take that responsibility to care for veterans very, very seriously. As it relates to veterans broadly in the state of Wyoming, of course, this hits me as kind of a fresh new veteran, just off active duty last year. Wyoming also has one of the highest densities of veterans anywhere in the United States. I think, the stats change from time to time. We're always in the top 5, but I believe we're actually number 2 in per capita rates of veteran, only second to Alaska. So for the lower 48, we're number 1. As it relates specifically to Wyoming, one of the most acute problems that we have here is behavioral health issues. The Sheridan VA up by you should be, in my mind, the leader when it comes to preventing suicide, any attempts, and being able to leverage technology, being able to leverage rural healthcare and the involvement of community clinics here. So to kind of go back just a little bit to Trump's first term and the Mission Act, I think that the VA in many ways it is outside of the Pentagon. It is the largest federal bureaucracy that we have. And I don't know that too many people realize that. So in many ways, I think that the mission serving in Congress is not only going to be to oversee and hold the VA accountable, but we have to prioritize making the system more efficient. That starts when our service members leave the military, whether active duty, guard, or reserve, whatever compo they're in, making sure that all of their records are transitioned effectively to the VA. I'm sure that you've heard about this, David, but one of the things that frustrated me leaving active duty was you've accumulated medical records from whatever happened to you during your time of service. You either hand carry them, we've transitioned to a digital form. When you separate, there's no accountability, there's no transition process to ensure that went to the VA, and not only to the VA writ large, but did that go to where you're moving back to? I returned to my home of record. There are veterans who maybe grew up in Wyoming, they served honorably, they're discharged, and they go live in Indiana. Just as for instance, the VA doesn't really have accountability of you. They'll probably catch you maybe 6, 9, 12 months down the road. And that's if you're lucky. So to answer your question a little bit more directly, I think that there needs to be a concerted effort. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is making sure that the transition from service into the VA is seamless. We should be sharing the same data sets, the same data systems. You're a veteran. We should be able to track you and know that you're coming. We should be able to catch you, so to speak. And then also programs like, the Wyoming Veterans Home, they need to be funded. This isn't and that those monies need to come in predictable fashion, not held up in legislation that is, extraneous to the issue at hand. So for the veterans home, if I can remember correctly, and you'll have to forgive me if I mess this up, but I believe they're asking for a certain amount of money, an appropriation coming from the Milcon VA subsection in the federal budget. Well, they're sitting there and they're competing with other projects such as F.E. Warren's Sentinel missile program upgrade. Well, when you start looking at different upgrades to different facilities and you're competing against something like Cheyenne, you got a real issue on your hands. The case has to be made more fervently, and it has to be made strongly, in my view, that you need to separate the two, and you need to ensure that the priorities are funded to take care of veterans from the time that they're serving, that they're in the fight, and then to make sure that the country is there to catch them on the back end and take care of them. So ultimately what it comes down to is Congress, as an Article I branch of our Constitution, has to assert its role in oversight. It sounds really simple. It sounds like I'm kind of like hand waving it, but what it comes down to is being on the right committees, building coalitions of the willing, people who care about these things, and making sure that we're overseeing different departments and agencies to ensure that the people that we have commitments and obligations to help take care of, that we're actually doing that. So that's what I intend to do.
All right. Well, I've got two more quick questions, and then I'll stop pestering you. Now, this first one, I don't really know how important this is, but you're going to get asked this all over the state. So why not ask you right now? How long have you lived in Wyoming this past time?
Oh, this past time? So I separated from active duty just this past year. So my wife and I have been here for 6 months.
Okay. All right. And then last question, and this one's more just because I'm curious. If I were to ask you how you would characterize yourself politically, what would your answer be?
I'm a conservative Republican, and I take that from my roots and my parents. Again, I think it's rare to find a child, a first generation child of two legal immigrants who came to this country, waving the American flag. I might add, that's one key indicator of when you look at immigrants on the television screen. One thing to key in on that my parents had always mentioned is you need to look at what sort of flag they're waving as they come across the border or they're landing on our shores. If they're waving the American flag, you probably think that they want to be a part of this American project. If they're not, then I think it's appropriate to second guess. And one thing maybe to go back to your question about how long I've been here, I do, I've been confronted with that question. I do want
Probably a
to
lot.
highlight, I do want to highlight that, looking at the other candidates in the race, growing up here, I've lived in this state longer than many of the other candidates, certainly the front runners. So, I think it's an interesting question because it's in some ways it's kind of this it's this heuristic to sort of dismiss my military service, which I'm not saying that you're doing that by
to be
any
very
means.
clear, for me, you get a pass on that one.
Well, and just to address maybe the critics who aren't on the conversation on the call or in the room, I think it's an important point to make that, I don't think that we should look at veterans and say, hey, thank you for serving 2, 4, 8, 12 years in my case. You were gone and yeah, you deployed to war, but you're not really from here anymore. So
Yeah,
all that time
really
away,
irritates the crap out of me.
Yeah, the only reason I sort of make that point is, and I know that you'll appreciate this, but when you're serving in the active duty military, you're stripped away of your personal identity, and for good reason. The only, everyone's given the same uniform, you go eat at the same time, you perform hygiene at the same time, and you execute your duties all in uniform, together, synchronized. The only distinguishing characteristic that you have about yourself is where you're from. So for 12 years, I've already in some ways had the privilege of representing my hometown of Casper, Wyoming abroad. I'm very privileged to have done so. But one of the unique things that happens, and this kind of speaks a little bit to the transition from active duty or, again, any compo, whether that's the Guard or Reserve, And folks, when they're coming home, we put our veterans in a very difficult position when we sort of do this name check thing, like, hey, you weren't at my kid's birthday party last year, so are you really from here?
I was in
I think it's a fine
Afghanistan.
question.
No.
Yeah, I think it's a fine question to ask. But in some sense, I just think we need to be a little careful in the sort of, hey, you're not from here because you were busy in Afghanistan, and oh yeah, by the way, pat on the back, thank you for your service too. It's a bit of a paradox in my mind. So sorry
Well,
sorry to go back to that, but this is just an issue. Is
I'm
um,
sure that it gets on your nerves.
yeah, and maybe it's just a final point, and one of the things that, and I'm sorry for going on a little bit long about
No.
this, but it's something that I care quite a bit about. You know, Veterans are committing suicide at a rate of 20 to 22 per day. I even had friends who I separated. I was honorably discharged from the Army, and I remember distinctly having a phone call with one of my really really good friends, and he was struggling because he's like, hey man, like I don't, grew up in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and he was a bomb disposal tech, an EOD tech, and he got back there and he goes, everyone that I'm talking to here, I'm not from here. I have all these stories about, serving in these different countries, and I just I wasn't at the fish fry, last month or last year or whatever the case is. So I'm an outsider to my own hometown, and I can't just go check in and go do PT with my old unit anymore. So I'm kind of caught in this in between, and you know, I think that really presents a very hard struggle. I think for a lot of veterans who are scared about their sort of identity. It was all wrapped up in the military. They committed themselves to service. They were told that what they were doing was honorable, and all these sorts of things, and then they come back and they go, well, you don't measure up to my standard of you know what I want for you. So sorry to go on
No,
so
no.
long about that. It's just, I think that actually relates to a lot of different issues for veterans, especially as they transition.
Well, and I think it's an important point simply because in politics we tend to look at the superficial. I absolutely hate it when I hear, "Well, I'm a fourth generation Wyomingite." Well, frankly, that doesn't tell me anything about you. I mean, it tells me that your parents had pretty good taste, but it doesn't tell me a single thing about who you are. And it and again, I mean, it's just the superficial nature of politics as it relates to what you were talking about. Now, I'm not in my downtown studio today, but one of my prized possessions in the downtown studio, and if you get to Sheridan, I'll show it to you. But my wife and I have a friend who was in Kuwait during the 12-day war, and before she deployed, I gave her a couple of Cowboy State Politics hats, and I said, "Look, man, I just want a picture of you wearing a Cowboy State Politics hat, you know, over in the boonies, wherever you're going." Well, what I got back, and I didn't expect this at all, was one of my hats signed by the 115th Field Artillery Unit, and I mean, I was blown away when she handed that to me. But the reason I bring it up, one, because the hat's cool, but two,
It's good reading. Yeah.
when this whole Iran thing started, she had a really hard time because where she lived, where she stayed at, and when she was deployed, it got hit by a big giant rocket, and she's been having a really hard time. And so, I think that too often we dismiss the commitment of people who join the military. We dismiss what they don't get to see, what they don't get to participate in. And frankly, I find it kind of insulting when, a veteran comes home and it's, "Oh, hey, you missed this." Well, no kidding, because I was overseas. So, well, David, I've taken up enough of your time this morning. Thank you for sitting down and having a nice discussion. If my viewers want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
DavidGiralt.com. Again, the website is DavidGiralt.com. I'm also on Facebook. It's funny. I've spent my entire professional career attempting to keep a low low social media profile, and here I
Oops.
am doing the exact opposite. So I'm on Facebook at David Giralt for Wyoming, and then I'm on Instagram at Giralt the number 4 WY. So I am all of a sudden all across everyone's social media, and that's the best way to find me.
All right. Well, David, appreciate it. Good luck on your campaign, and when you're up here in Sheridan, hit me up, and we'll sit down in the studio, and I'll show you that hat.
I can't thank you enough, and really appreciate your comments on all those things, David. Thank you for the time, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Have a good one. All right, that was U.S. House candidate David Giralt. I'm going to make sure I'll make this interview available to you, make it easy for you to listen to. I think it was a good discussion. So let's go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the program. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that the rest of the Wyoming media, well, frankly, they don't even try. And I mean, it's so easy. All you have to do is tell people the truth. Well, welcome back to the program, my friends. Moving through a Tuesday morning program on Cowboy State Politics Live. Now, if you just missed it, we just had U.S. House candidate David Giralt on the show. I think we had a great conversation. It was, a little bit more than half an hour long. So appreciate him, and I'll make that interview easy for everybody to find when we finish up the program. Well, let's move to some state issue stuff. Now, there's a piece by George Will that was featured in the Pravda on the Platte, the Casper Star Tribune, and it's entitled, U.S. Schools Violate Parental Rights by Hiding Transitioning. Now, this is another one of those issues that we constantly hear Well, that's not happening in Wyoming. You know, all of that stuff, those are just national issues. Why are you focusing on them? Because they're not just national issues. A lot of the stuff you see on the national news, well, it is happening in Wyoming. It's just that it's the nature of the Wyoming media to brush it aside, to not cover it, to not pay any attention to it. Now, so here we have the Pravda on the Platte publishing an op-ed by George Will about the most recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, and they completely ignore the exact same thing that happened in Rock Springs. And it's the case of Ashley and Sean Willie and their daughter Aspen. Now, I first talked to them back in 2023, so 3 years ago. And essentially what happened is the school was, behind their back, was transitioning their daughter. And Aspen's mom, Ashley, didn't find out about it until she was at a school function. And it happened just by pure coincidence. It was, oh, so you work at the high school. You must know my daughter. And then things just kind of went downhill from there. So first, let me tell you about this George Will piece, and then I'm going to play you a section of the interview I did with Ashley and Sean Willie back in 2023. So first, the opinion piece in the Pravda on the Platte, and I quote, while clearing her 13-year-old daughter's room in 2022, Amber Levine found a chest binder. A social worker at the 8th grader's school in Maine, 8th grader, had given the child the device, which flattens breasts to facilitate masculine appearance. Unbeknownst to Levine, at school, her daughter was using masculine pronouns. This is going to sound really familiar in just a second. Levine is represented by the Phoenix-based Goldwater Institute, a liberty-defending think tank, and 18 states have, so far, joined an amicus brief supporting her petition asking the Supreme Court to hear her challenge to the supposed policy of the community school board. That policy is fictitious. Levine, or the board's written guidelines for, quote, addressing the needs of transgender students require parental involvement. So the school board says there can be no constitutional violation. But Levine argues that the actual policy, as demonstrated by her surprise on discovering the facts about her child at school, is to withhold information from the parents. So in other words, the school does whatever they want to do to your kid while they're at school, and then they don't tell you what they're doing. You see, a lot of our schools are under the mistaken impression that children are theirs, that they are the parent. And why wouldn't they have that perception? Because we have, for a very long time, neglected and I use that word intentionally, neglected our duties as parents. I'm not saying everybody, I'm saying, but we have in many cases. And just think about it, right? Your kids get up and go get ready for school about, probably 7 o'clock in the morning. They go to school by 8 and they're there all the way till 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it's school activities after that. Maybe it's football practice or golf or speech and debate or whatever. And finally, they get home at 6-ish. And so they've spent almost their entire half day at school. And then we wonder why, indeed, that we don't have any idea what's happening to them at school. Well, back to the piece, even after Levine had objected to the school's sneakiness, no school employee was disciplined. And the school board unanimously voted to award a new contract to the social worker who taught Levine's daughter how to use the binder. So they rehired the person. And who told her he would not inform her mother? The advertised guidelines might as well be written in smoke on the water. Last year, in a case of hyper-progressive Montgomery County, Maryland, the Supreme Court held that parental rights can be violated by a school's policies about what and how children are taught. The court, citing the First Amendment guarantee of free exercise of religion, upheld the right of the parents of elementary school pupils to advance notice of and the option to withdraw their children from instruction featuring LGBTQZXPWD storybooks. All rights have boundaries, often where they rub against other rights. The right to free speech can be regulated to accommodate the community's need for time, place, and manner restrictions, such as no amplified speaking next to hospitals or schools. Parental primacy in child rearing does not guarantee complete parental discretion over, say, vaccinations of a child. But the Supreme Court has, however, long held that parents have primary authority, not absolute, but primary, over the upbringing and education of their children. Goldwater litigators argue that this surely encompasses what a school is doing that pertains and facilitates and hides a child's transition from one gender to another. The school board in Maine justified the school's surreptitiousness regarding Levine by citing a state law affirming a student's right to privacy. But of course, the parents are the ones that are in charge of what happens to that kid. The parents make the decision until that child is 18. The Ninth Amendment, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights, rarely surfaces in constitutional reasoning. However, it did make a quiet cameo appearance in a recent case involving issues similar to Levine's. Supreme Court Justice, and listen to this, Elena Kagan correctly said that parents have unenumerated rights, indisputably fundamental ones, concerning their child's life choices. A century of judicial affirmations of parents' rights have embedded them deeply in American assumptions and practices. Now, for many voters, K-12 education is their most intimate and important contact with government. And the Goldwater litigators note that in another case, Justices Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, and Neil Gorsuch cited a report that nearly 6,000 schools have policies that block parents from learning about their children's gender identity experimenting and the ways that school personnel are involved in it. Woe betide the politicians who plant themselves in support of such policies. You see, it's absolutely wrong for a school board, what have you, to abrogate the rights of parents, to go against the wishes of parents. But too often, schools do that. Now, let me give you a perfect Wyoming case in a lawsuit that is still ongoing. So this is a piece of my interview with Ashley and Sean Willey from 2023. Now, it runs about 9 minutes. We'll go ahead and listen to it, but just listen close to what these parents say. Here you go.
3/4 of the way through last year, I was at a training, district-wide. Well, it was district-wide, but it was something you could sign up for it. So it was something I specifically chose. And I was sitting at a table talking to a coworker, and there was some other people there, and it got brought up that they work at Black Butte High School in Rock Springs. And I said, "Oh, do you know my daughter Aspen?" And the lady said that she did. She loves Aspen. Aspen's such a sweet girl. And the gentleman sitting next to her, I said, do you know Aspen too? And he said, "I think so," and said Aspen in a different last name. And I said, "No, that's not her." And I had my planner that has pictures of my family all over it, and I pushed it towards him and pointed, and I said, this is Aspen right here. And he looked very confused. And she, sitting 3 feet away from me, if that, covers her face and says, "It goes by Cooper." And
whoa,
wow. Yeah, I said, no, she goes by Aspen. And so that night I went home, told Sean. I left the meeting early. I left the training early, told Sean we spoke with Aspen, and I emailed the school right away. And I said, "I'm appalled that you would do this, that you would hide it from us." I said, "It stops now. I'm her mother. You don't have to agree with me, but that's just the way things are." And so the principal emailed back that he was going to check with HR and he'd let me know. And I said, "No, I'm her mom. That's all the directive you need. So I'm going to take this as a direct denial to follow my request, and I'm going to go to HR myself." So then we did. We went and we tried to talk and handle it out and work through it that way. And we thought we were getting somewhere. And then this year, things just got worse. The policy, what they're trying to call a policy, came out. And as an employee in the district, they wanted me to sign. I was in the training saying, "This is what we're expecting you to do." And so, yeah.
So how long have they been referring to your daughter as Cooper?
For 3/4 of the school year last year. Sean's worried about using the specific name, so I don't know about that, but 3/4 of the year for sure. And then
like you're a teacher in the school district. So
yeah.
Is this a district-wide policy that you're not supposed to tell parents if a child wants to be referred to by another name or another pronoun?
Yeah, down to kindergarten.
Wow.
If I could clarify that just for a minute.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I don't want to get.
Okay, so I had forgotten that this is Ashley and Sean Willie's lawyer at the time, who's clarifying a little bit here. So just to make that clear for you.
Confused. Some people connote policy with a formally adopted Board of Education, quote unquote policy. We're not claiming that here. I'll use the district term, and the term they've used is directive. But like a policy, it has been applied district-wide, and employees have been directed to implement it. So with that clarification, go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, they did, down to kindergarten. And when I brought my concerns and I told them, this is not something that I will do as somebody who I won't lie. I have my morals and I'm not going to lie to people, but also as somebody that this personally happened to, I'm not going to do that to other parents. So I did approach them and tell them that I was not going to be doing that.
Well, and that's just the thing, we're kind of in this weird sort of place where, parents apparently don't have any rights over their children. I was just reading an article the other day about Natrona County, where they have this ridiculous policy or directive or whatever we want to call it, that, if there's a pornographic book in the library, that parents have to opt in or opt out. Well, how the heck is you as a parent? I mean, how are you going to know what's in the library? Similarly, when your daughter's at school, what are you to know what happens for 8 hours out of the day? I mean, it's absolutely bizarre to me.
It is.
The next question would be, like, after you told the school, no, we're not going to be doing that, and I know I've used the audio from the school board meeting from last year several times on the program. So what, did the school back off at all, or did they just continue, their directive?
After we sat down and met with superintendent and the principal, and we explained all the backstory. Aspen was in counseling. Aspen has been going through therapy, and they knew nothing about that. And what they had done is they undid all of that therapy that we had done for the previous year by enabling her without them knowing. And that's the biggest thing. They don't know what a child has gone through, what a child is doing. And so after our meeting, they both agreed with us verbally that they would communicate 100% moving forward with our daughter, that they wouldn't hide anything. If anything changed, they would let us know. If she came back to them a couple weeks later and said, I want to be referred to by this pronoun, by this name now, again, they said they would communicate with us. And we were okay with that. And they said that they asked for the same courtesy that if our daughter comes home and tells us anything about what's going on at school or within her classrooms, that we communicate that with them as well. And we are 100% okay with that, because that's something that's very important that everybody should know, should be on the same page. And like Ashley said, fast forward to the beginning of the school year when they rolled out this directive, she went to the principal of the school and said, I just want to make sure our agreement still stands.
We're on the same page.
And we're going to be communicating. And he looked at her and said, if your daughter comes to me and wants me to lie to you, I will lie to you.
Wow.
And when I approached the superintendent, I'm asking her the same questions. She skirted around the issue. And I told her, I said, we agreed you would communicate in regards to my child. And she just kept, well, this is what my notes say. And so then I took it. I changed direction. I said, set aside the parental stuff, because obviously I'm going to have to take that further, whatever that means. I don't remember my exact wording for that. But so I said, set aside that. I said, as an employee in this district, I would like to know when you're going to hold a meeting and let parents know that you want us to lie to them. And she said, we're not asking you to lie. And went on this whole thing and kind of read parts from the directive. And I said, I apologize for my wording. I would like to know when you're going to have a meeting and let parents know about this new policy. I called it a policy because that's what was relayed to me. And she told me that I was twisting her words and that she was going to end the call.
Well, I think it was in that September article of last year, the one that was about Sean's speech at the school board. The attorney for the district basically said that they have no intention of informing parents about what's going on at school. And I mean, I'm personally, I'm not a parent, so I find that pretty offensive. You know, we're kind of in this, as I said, we're kind of in this weird place where the schools think that they're the parent, and you know, to heck what the parents say.
Well, and Sean asked him in the board meeting. He asked him, since you're making this parental decision, are you going to, how did you word it?
Asked them if they were going to provide support and counseling for these students.
Yep.
Because anybody in this realm that's dealing with this gender dysphoria, this problem, needs somebody to talk to, needs somebody to help them with it, whether they're confused, whether they're dead set on this is who they are and how they're going to live their life, that's fine. But everybody needs help. Everybody needs counseling. And I asked them, since they're taking that ability away from parents to help their children, are they going to provide that assistance? And not from a school counselor, but from somebody certified outside of the school in that particular subject. And they told me multiple times, no, that we will absolutely not do that. That's not something we can do. Then why take that ability away from parents? Why drive that wedge between the family and not allow a parent to help their child?
Just wind them up and let them go. That the school doesn't want any responsibility in whatever it is that they're doing. Instead, they set up directives and policies. I'll call it a policy. When you're telling an entire group of people to say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to follow, that's a policy, whatever the legal description is for it. Well, that interview was from 2023. So 3 years ago. In fact, I looked at the date that I first published that, and it was in May of 2023. So almost 3 years ago. And that thing is still going on. It's to say that these sorts of things don't happen in Wyoming because, you know, we live in such a wholesome place, which we do. But the truth is that these sorts of things do happen here. And if we're just going to stick our heads in the sand and just say that, you know, well, this isn't happening here, so we don't have to do anything about it. I mean, that's a real disservice. It's verging on a crime that we're doing to our children. And it's the very people that are entrusted to take care of those kids for the majority of the school day. The Wyoming legislature has got to do something with this. I mean, I don't know exactly what it is that they can do, because a lot of this is up to the courts. And when we have liberal judges, and fantastic new liberal judge in Sweetwater County, Clark Stith, the guy that donates to drag shows. That's why I call him Drag Show Clark Stith. I'm sure he's going to be a great one to take care of this. But my friends, this problem is ongoing, and you know, you need to be paying attention to what's happening in the schools in your own community. And it's not just if you have kids in the district or if you don't. Your tax dollars pay for this stuff. And so you should be involved. You should attend the school board meetings. You know, one of the craziest school board meetings that I went to and shared, and it was about all these porn books in the library. A dad got up, and I don't remember which book he was reading from, but he had one of these books that absolutely does contain pornography. And anybody that claims that they don't has never opened one, frankly. Anyway, he starts to read from this thing, and the school board shut him down and said, "Oh, sir, that's inappropriate. You can't be reading that in a school board meeting." And the irony was absolutely lost on the school board. It was in school district number 2. This was several years ago, so many of the people on the school board weren't there then. But the irony being, it's inappropriate for a school board meeting that is full of adults, but it's completely okay to be in the library in the school. It's wrong. And, you know, these are questions that you should absolutely ask all of these people that are running for office. Hey, what about these pornography books in the library? You going to do anything about that? And just listen to what their answers are. Often you can hear everything you need to know about somebody if you just let them talk. And if you pay attention, and through the campaign season, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be on this program and on the podcast. And if you'll notice, my style of interviewing is just to let them talk so that you learn who these people are. Well, Ashley, Sean, if you're listening to the program, you're welcome to come back on and give us an update on what's happening with your case, and we can talk about some of these things. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. Where we're going next, judge shopping. Of course the abortion clinic wants the same judge. Of course they do. Too bad that's not their decision, or at least we hope not. Back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by the man upstairs, God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. We're burning through another busy broadcast, 2 hours on a Tuesday. Well, I know, you know what? We've been talking about a lot of really heavy stuff this morning on the program. But one good piece of good news in my world is it's baseball season. In fact, opening day is Wednesday, and so I get to give you updates on my beloved Texas Rangers. And I should probably tell you, you might be wondering why I'm a Texas Rangers fan. I'll tell you. The lovely Christine and I were in Dallas for a couple of different reasons. She had a hair show. I had a date at Glenn Beck's studio. I was on the Chad Prather program, and a friend of mine works down there, so went to visit him and did a little politicking while I was there. So while we were down there, I said to the lovely Christine, hey, let's see if the Rangers are in town, and if they are, let's go to a game. So we end up going, and we walk in, and it was in June. Of course, Major League Baseball, for the most part, one of the more embarrassing things that they do is they fully participate in Pride Month. I don't know why we need an entire month for that. I don't even know why we need to recognize somebody's sexual, proclivities. It's absolutely bizarre to me. But anyway, we walked into Texas Rangers Stadium, Globe Life Field, and there was not a rainbow flag, no reference to Pride Month, as you would find in other major league stadiums. And we walked up to the beer trailer, a little beer stand, and I said, I need 2 fake beers or non-alcoholic beers. And the lady gives me like 2 Bud Zeros. And at the time, that was that whole Bud Light controversy where nobody was drinking Budweiser. And I must have grimaced. And she said, "Hey, this is Texas Ranger Stadium. We don't do that stuff here. Do you want a beer or not?" And I was like, "Oh, well, okay. Yeah, well, definitely." And so we went to watch the game, and they were playing the Angels. And, of course, they had their stupid pride patches on, and they're wearing their rainbow shoes, and it's thoroughly embarrassing. Not the Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers have for a long time, not participated in any of this stupid Pride Month thing. And it was such an enjoyable experience for Christine and I to just sit there and watch a baseball game. No stupid politics, none of that crap, no pride flags around. And so from then on, I said, I am going to be a Texas Rangers fan. Well, I was watching the first game. It was still preseason, technically. But I was watching a game last night, and one of their pitchers got some pretty good news on while he was on the mound. And again, it's preseason, so we still don't have the opening day roster yet. But the pitcher got some pretty good news while standing on the mound. Here's that little video.
So Schumacher out there with a word for Baumler, and it looks like you get the sense, right, that he just let him know some pretty good news.
Yeah, I think he told him he made the team.
That was great. The reaction from his teammates.
That's awesome.
What a way to do that. That is so cool. And what a neat moment out on the mound with Skip Schumacher. Congrats.
That's right, my friends. My favorite time of year, baseball season, and I will be diligent about giving you updates from my the best team in baseball. I don't really care if the Dodgers won the World Series. They didn't. It should have been the Rangers, but there again, they kind of stunk last year. But being a recovering Denver Bronco fan, I am well educated on. Sometimes you don't have good seasons, but you still got to be a fan. I'm by the way, I no longer watch football. I'm still pissed at them at the whole kneeling for the national anthem thing, which another thing that the Texas Rangers did not do. All right, from the cow pie. Wyoming Attorney General says pulling retired judge into abortion case amounts to judge shopping. And I quote, trying to convince a retired judge to add a fresh challenge to the Wyoming's newest abortion ban into a case that's been ongoing for a year amounts to judge shopping, a Wyoming Attorney General's deputy argued, a hearing set for March 30th. Trying to convince a retired judge to add a fresh challenge against Wyoming's newest abortion ban into a case, Wyoming has been trying without success to ban most abortions since Roe v. Wade's overturning in 2022. After years of more temporary court blocks on such laws, the Wyoming Supreme Court on January 6th struck down 2 abortion bans altogether and ruled that abortion is health care and access to it is protected as a fundamental right under the state constitution's promise of health care autonomy. Now, of course, Article 1, Section 38, which is the section that they are referring to, let me just see here, and I will read it to you. Let's see, Article 4, Article 3... Article 1, and hold on just a second, and I'll read to you Article 1, Section 38 of the Wyoming Constitution. And it reads, each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own health care decisions. The parent, guardian, or legal representative of any other natural person shall have the right to make health care decisions for that person. Any person may pay, and the health care provider may accept direct payment for health care without imposition of penalties. Now, and here is the part that the Supreme Court leaves out, and everybody forgets that is in the Wyoming Constitution. Quote, the legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section to protect the health and general welfare of the people or to accomplish other purposes set forth in the Wyoming Constitution. I would argue Article 7, Section 20, which says it's the job of the legislature to maintain the morality of the state. Now, the Supreme Court ruled, just created out of whole cloth this idea that abortion is health care. Nowhere in Wyoming statute will you find a reference that says that abortion is health care. But the Wyoming Supreme Court created that. Now, the truth is that's not their role. That's the epitome of judicial activism. It is legislating from the bench. That there was only one Supreme Court justice that ruled against it is an absolute abomination. And if Chief Justice Baumgarten wants to criticize me again for this, which, by the way, I'm very happy that the Chief Justice listens to this program. But you're dead wrong on this one. You don't have the right to legislate from the bench. That's not your role. Your judge is to judge things, judge facts. Your role is not to create legislation. Now, what I'm referring to with the Chief Justice is during the State of the State address, the Chief Justice actually said, there's this widely popular podcast that's putting out misinformation. And, we're not partisan. Uh-huh. Which podcast do you think she was referring to? It's that you've made it when the Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court has to argue against you during the State of the State address. And by the way, Chief Justice, that the invitation to come on Cowboy State Politics is still open. You're more than welcome to come here. But anyway, so the Supreme Court rules that abortion is health care, which, interestingly enough, a couple of months before, in November of 2025, she wrote a letter to the legislature asking them to protect the life and liberty of the people that are involved in the court. Now, wait a minute. So you're asking the legislature to protect adults, but we evidently can't protect children, right? Well, anyway, the Attorney General's office says that this is a matter of judge shopping. The Cowboy continues. The legislature, in its recent session, did not advance to the voters a ballot proposition to change the Constitution. Instead, lawmakers passed a fourth abortion ban, criminalizing abortions after the point at which a fetal heartbeat can be heard, which is about 6 weeks. I would argue it's a little bit lower than that, but then what would I know? I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on the radio. The ban contains a safety net saying that if it's blocked in court, abortions will become illegal only after the point of viability. The same pro-choice coalition that has amassed court wins for nearly 4 years challenged the new Human Heartbeat Act almost as soon as Governor Gordon signed it into law. But they brought this challenge in a unique fashion, asking the retired judge to hear the arguments against the new ban as part of a court challenge against lesser restrictions. So in other words, they want the same judge that ruled in those other cases to follow this one, because they know that he's left-leaning and that they think that it will be more favorable to them. Well, according to the Attorney General's office, this is straight-up judge shopping. Here is what the Attorney General's office said. Judge shopping is recognized as particularly pernicious. The court should deny the plaintiff's motion because it amounts to judge shopping. They also wrote that the method the pro-choice group chose, quote, leads one to conclude that they instead prefer to have the matter decided by this judge. The pro-choice group comprised of Danielle Johnson, Doctors Giovannia Anthony, and Renee Hinkle. Renee Hinkle is the former Wyoming bureaucrat that is a radical pro-abortionist. And the abortion clinic Wellspring Health Access challenged 2 abortion restrictions last year, a law requiring ultrasounds before the prescription of chemical abortion drugs and a law requiring licensure of surgical abortion clinics. And here's the bizarre thing. These people they don't really care about the life of the mother. They don't care about the life of the child, because if they did, they would want licensed surgical facilities. But instead, they challenge that too. So any restriction at all on the abominable practice of abortion, they're opposed to, which I think tells you everything you need to know about the type of people that are opposing this abortion ban. And by the way, just think about the fetal health care law, which, by the way, was Speaker Chip Nyman's bill that, and the law basically says that after a heartbeat can be detected, no abortions. Well, why would you want to kill another living human being anyway? And I mean, the same thing that David Giralt and I talked about, that abortion is murder, that life begins at conception, that there's no question. And, I mean, we understand the the political nature of things, that sometimes you can't get things passed and you have to understand the political reality of where you're at. And where we're at is, okay, there's going to be some exceptions, whether we like it or not. And so that was the reasoning behind there, that after a heartbeat, no abortions. Because you won't agree that life begins at conception, which every biology textbook in the world agrees with and says that, life is, and there's three conditions of it. It's converting food into energy, cell division, and response to stimuli. If you have those three things, it qualifies as life according to any textbook. But of course, the leftists and the communists and the pro-abortion activists, they don't recognize biology. In fact, that they think you should just be able to kill anything that you want. Because, without the heartbeat bill, we pretty much have the same restrictions on abortion that North Korea does in Wyoming. That essentially that the abortion was legal, killing babies was legal up to the point of birth, and it's abominable. And I cannot believe that. I mean, of course you have to believe it because these people are here, but I'm shocked that there are people in Wyoming that actually believe this. Abortion is murder, always has been, always will be, and if you can have a law that says if you kill a woman who is pregnant, that's 2 charges, not 1. If that law is okay, how is it that the abortion law isn't? There's contradiction. The contradictions abound, my friends, and it's just it's abomination that has been around. It's in the Bible, right? Like worshiping Moloch and child sacrifice, and there's nothing new in the world, my friends, and certainly the existence of evil people, that's not new either. But as conservatives, and let me just talk to you about this for just a second, that as conservatives, we have to understand that there are some things that we'll just have to continually fight against, and abortion is one of those. That you have to understand that there are evil people in the world, and that they will fight against the protection of life every way that they possibly can. And no matter how many times we get defeated, or bills are overturned, and the Supreme Court says that abortion is healthcare, it doesn't matter. We have to continually fight. This is one of those subjects that you can't not fight for, that we have to advocate for the life of those people who are unable to do so on their own. And if you're a Republican, if you're conservative, if you're a human being, you should be advocating for the life of the unborn. And we have to, no matter how many setbacks we have, we cannot stop. This is one of those things that I believe it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said that God will not hold us blameless. That you will be called to account for what you did and what you didn't do. And it's, in my opinion, I do not want to be on the hook for not advocating for the life of little babies. Just saying, I think that's probably a black mark in the big man's book. All right, so a little bit of fun with politics, as I mentioned at the top of the program, that politics is funny, and we have to laugh about it, including when it's coming from Chuck U. Schumer. So recently, he made a little oopsie on the floor of the Senate, advocating for funding of ICE and the TSA. From the Daily Caller, Trump ridicules Schumer for accidentally demanding funding for ICE. And I quote, Democrats have held up funding for the Department of Homeland Security over operations by Immigration Customs Enforcement, with the latest effort to fund the entire department failing to achieve the required 60-vote threshold this past Friday. During Saturday's speech on the Senate floor, Schumer called for an end to the shutdown. Quote, "We must fund ICE. We must fund TSA," Schumer said in a video clip of the speech, which Trump promptly posted to Truth Social on Sunday morning. Quote, Schumer got a little discombobulated in the Senate yesterday and said, "We must fund ICE," prior to correcting himself. "Thank you, Chuck. I agree," Trump wrote in the post. Here is Chuck U. Schumer saying that we absolutely have to fund these folks. Here we go.
But that's an ongoing process. They're meeting today again. But we must fund TSA now.
We agree, Chucky boy. We absolutely should fund ICE and we should fund the TSA. I see no reason why we shouldn't. And you see, this shows you how confused the Democrats actually are. Now we can have a little grace with old Chucky boy, but we often, every one of us has little oopses. You say something wrong, say something that you didn't mean. But that one in particular is interesting because it shows. I mean, Chucky has been, advocating, saying how evil ICE is for a really long time, and so you would think that he would have that one down, but apparently not. Back to the Cowboy state for just a little bit. Our pal Becky Hadlock is going to be in court here pretty soon. The trial is set in the case of the Weston County clerk. Now, to refresh your memory, Becky Hadlock is the Weston County clerk. She's the one that absolutely hosed the last election, and it was my belief that she tried to cover up her goof ups. And see, I think if you listen to the interview she gave to me and gave to the Newsletter Journal, that what happened is she ordered ballots to be printed that were absolutely wrong, that were incorrect. And then she placed another order for ballots to be printed that were correct. And I think that she did the whole shuffle maneuver trying to cover up her mistake. But in the end, after the election, there were tons of undervotes. I think 1,000 undervotes, 1,200 undervotes in Representative Chip Nyman's race. And when I asked Becky Hadlock, hey, so typically, how many undervotes do you see in a race? She refused to answer the question because she knew that if she answered it, the number 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever it was going to be a lot larger than the number that she said. But here is what the Newsletter Journal says. The case seeking the removal of Weston County Clerk Becky Hadlock is moving forward on an expedited timeline with a jury trial scheduled to begin April 13th in Weston County District Court. According to the March 7th order signed by the 6th Judicial District Judge Michael McGrady, the matter of the state of Wyoming versus Clerk Becky Hadlock has been set for trial following scheduling conference held on March the 5th. The order establishes an accelerated schedule that departs from standard court timelines, noting that, quote, it does not follow the standard scheduling conventions of the court and modifies deadlines under the Wyoming Rules of Civil Procedure. The order further states that counsel are responsible for ensuring that all deadlines are met. Under the schedule, Hadlock's answer to the state's petition for her removal is due today, March 24th. Witness disclosures and final pretrial memorandum must be filed by March 30, with discovery closing on April 3rd. A final pretrial conference is scheduled for April 6th at 1:30 in the Weston County Courthouse. Now, the current proceedings stem from issues tied to the 2024 election. Now, remember, there are no problems with our elections. There are none. No problems. There is never a mistake, and even suggesting so is tantamount to heresy. So says probably Gail Simmons. That you can't even suggest that there are problems with our election. Now, remember that Becky Hadlock is the one that submitted an absolutely fraudulent report to the Secretary of State. She said, hey, there was no problem with our election. No, everything went to plan. Except for the whole point of Secretary of State Chuck Gray having to order a hand count to verify the results of the election, except for, of course, the numerous undervotes. And what was happening there is because the ballots were incorrectly printed, the machines only read what they're told to read. And so if the coordinates they're given for the specific dot on the ballot, you see, when you get your ballot and there's those little circles that you fill in, the machine is told to read the coordinates, that is the X and the Y coordinates of where that dot is. If those are incorrect in the machine, it's going to read a spot that there's nothing written on. So, of course, it's going to record a no vote. Well, that's what happened. And I think it's also clear from everything that's happened is that Becky Hadlock did not really test the machines with the ballots that she printed, because if she had, we wouldn't have had this problem. But, good luck. No, not good luck to Becky Hadlock. She needs to go down the road and choose another form of employment, one that doesn't have anything to do with elections. Well, my friends, that pretty much does it for a busy broadcast day on the program. Had a great program. Enjoyed talking with Mr. David Giralt. And I will, sometime later today, I'll make that interview handy for you so that you can watch it. I think it's a very interesting interview. Asked him a lot of good questions. And so anyway, for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. I'll see you tomorrow, my friends, hopefully from the downtown studio. Have a good afternoon.